Welcome back to best hour of their day. James, I'm going to give you the best introduction I can. Are you ready?
I can't wait.
So we have James Hobart. Here's what I have to say about James Hobart. I think you are the most decorated team athlete ever in CrossFit. What do you think
That's
about that?
that's pretty good. I don't know if that's the best introduction I've ever
I'm
had.
not done. I'm not done. I'm not done. So let's go on. Owner of CrossFit Boston,
Yes,
uh, part of
proudly.
the, part of the Ham Plan programming, along with Austin and Spencer.
The triumvirate. Yep.
A longtime member of the CrossFit Seminar Staff, and you hold the distinction of being a flowmaster.
Yeah, and a level 4 now.
Oh, congrats on that. Maybe we'll touch on that. And
Thank
and
you.
maybe most importantly, engaged to someone significantly out of your league. So maybe that's it.
Yeah, I definitely yeah, I out threw my coverage with Cassandra. But yeah, she took pity on me. I'm very lucky.
Well, being someone else in that category, I can appreciate it. So very cool. How was that?
Yeah.
Better? You happy with that?
That's I love that. Yeah, no, that's amazing.
All right. So James Hobart on here. There's really so many different directions I can take this, but to start, I definitely want to talk to you about coaching CrossFit. Like you said, you are a level 4 CrossFit coach. So let's get that answer out of the way because people are going to be listening and they're like, "Well, how do I even get that?" So, how do you become a level 4 CrossFit coach these days? I have mine as well. It was a little bit different, but what's the standard these days and it's going to be out in the future. What will that look like?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say at this point, I don't believe the test has been fully released. And in the old days, I think in the old days, you just had to show up at enough seminars, and you got like a pat on the back, and like you learned the secret handshake, and you were in. And then it after level 1, it changed. So the original CrossFit level 2 course was really just 2 days of a ass whooping of your knowledge of the 9 foundational movements. But if you pass that, and the pass rate at that time was really low, right? It was like under 40% or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I took the second ever in Santa Cruz at the original box, and I don't. Had you ever been to the original box?
I have been out there, but not when it was going.
So there was like a staircase upstairs, kind of had a lounge area, and you did all this testing for basically most of the 2 days, and in the last hour or two, you're going up there and finding out your destiny, if you will, and people were just going up and coming back down crying, like
I love
grown
it.
men crying because who was up there? It was like Nicole Carroll, Dave Castro, Pat Sherwood, and it's not like they were being mean, but here you are being told you're not very good at something you think you are,
Yeah.
and luckily I didn't come back down crying. I passed, and like you said, that was kind of the way to become a level 4 up until now.
Yeah, you charmed them. And now, so now it's a stepped process, So you have to have your level 1, your level 2. You must apply to and pass the CFL3, the Certified CrossFit Level 3 Trainer test. And then I believe it's coming soon. Level 4 is coming soon, and that'll refer to, I think it's Certified CrossFit Level 4 Coach. Um, and whereas I guess the level 3 was a demonstration of knowledge. I think the level 4 will be a application of knowledge in a coaching in a class environment, and I believe they're still working on all the details of that.
Yeah, and if you're listening and you're like, man, I want this out, that's cool, but you're not ready to take it. And I don't know who you are. I just know, you need to be prepared to demonstrate your ability, like you just said. The level 3 test is a challenge. I took all, 4 hours of my time at a computer, and the level 4, I have no doubt, is going to be a challenge because that's quite an honor. I mean, it's the highest degree, if you will, you can get these days in CrossFit.
Yeah, I think it will be a really big honor. This thing, and I've loved all of the steps, especially as CrossFit's courses have become accredited. I think the steps that they've added on are really excellent. And obviously I believe in that because it's a big part of what I do. But I think it's funny with the level 3, I met a lot of people or have come across people who have failed, and they get, and I know it's because they care, but they get so hurt by it. And I think it's always good to remember too, as coaches, it's sort of like, well, are you good at gymnastics movements? Yeah, maybe. And then, how are you at weightlifting movements? You're like, oh, my weightlifting movements suck. And I think sometimes, we forget to look at our own other skill sets in that way. It's like, well, maybe you have a really good understanding of like, how to run a timeline in a class or engage people, but maybe just your knowledge of CrossFit is kind of weak, or your knowledge of just that kind of training is weak. And I think it's good for people to try and take a much broader approach to a single skill set. But yeah, the level 4 I think will be tough for a lot of people, but I also think it'll be good for them to continually do better at something they care about. So I'm excited to see what happens with it.
Yeah, I'm as well. So people are listening to this. We have 2 CrossFit level 4 coaches chatting, and really what I want to hear from you, because you are a phenomenal coach. You are one of the best in the world, and even though you're a more recent level 4 than I am, you are still someone I admire for your ability to coach other athletes. So people listening, I always like to ask the guests, like, what are some tangible things you would give to someone looking to develop as a CrossFit coach?
Wow. Yeah, there's so much to do here. Tangible things I would give to someone to develop as a CrossFit coach. And I would probably lean back on something that I do pretty regularly at the level 2s. And I would say have a very solid grasp on foundational knowledge. And it's so funny to say this sometimes, because I'll go and take classes. I travel a lot, and I'll go be at other affiliates, and I'll kind of watch somebody coach, or I'll chit chat with them after class. And I'm like, this person, this guy or girl didn't give me one cue about knees out. I didn't hear one technical cue about knees out or chest up, or, more hip extension or jump harder. But you know what? That was a really fun class. And I think you can get pretty far on just that, personality, charisma, entertainment factor. But I do think long-term, 5, 6, 7, 8 years out, you need to be able to really balance both. And not only that, if you're someone who doesn't run a great class, or you're working with somebody you're trying to develop, I think just telling them like, oh, you just got to have more energy or be bigger, some of that stuff can be ephemeral in such a way it's hard to give specific feedback. And you can just start them with, well, you know what, do you have a progression of how to teach 20 people an air squat? And in any trade or task or skill that I've ever learned, you're always more confident when you understand the fundamentals better. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to like memorize a speech you want to give, or repair something in your house. Like, the better grasp you have of just the basics, you're just always more confident as you proceed forward. And I think anytime a coach is more confident, they're able to do all of that intangible stuff, like be entertaining and be engaged and be caring better. So my first piece of advice would be, look at the foundational 9 movements, and how well do you know those? How well do you know the common faults? How many different common fixes do you have for how to help somebody push their knees out? And if you couldn't name those 9 and name the points performance of those to me right now, I'd say that's a great place to start. That's the place to start.
100% agree with you. And, I work the level 2s along with you, and that's often my biggest piece of feedback. Nicole Carroll is known for saying, be you at an 11, an old Spinal Tap reference. But like you said, it's hard to be you at an 11 when you're kind of unsure of what you're teaching. And here's how I kind of envision it, and let me know what you think. I tell people, go home. You need to know the 9 foundational movements. You need to know the points of performance associated with each one, and then there's faults with those, and you need to have a handful of verbal. You need to have a good visual and at least one good tactile cue to fix all of those. If you can do that for all 9, now you're becoming a better coach.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to start. And I think from there, and this is a hard thing to teach. I think it's something I've struggled with for a really long period of time, and what I've struggled with is how to explain others to know when you're in the right place for this or not, but is to kind of put yourself in the right place at the right time to learn from others. You have to seek out someone who's better than you and likes teaching you and you like learning from. I think, regardless of whatever the skill could be, I think that's a huge one as a new coach or even a new practitioner of any sort of skill you want to learn. I think you have to be in an environment. And I know I wouldn't be where I am today without the mentors and teachers that I've come across and that I've learned from. And I think I was always really willing to probably stick around a little longer than I was welcome to, just to try and squeeze some more knowledge out of people. But I think as a new coach, that's a huge one. And I think we forget so much. We just want to go off on our own and be like, oh, what do I need to know? Tell me what I need to know and I'll go do it. What's the best piece of advice you have? It's go find a lot of other people to give you good advice. I think that's a huge one.
For those that listen to this show regularly, they're going to realize, every good coach that I've had on has said that. EC said it yesterday. Boz said it. Austin said it. Every good coach is telling us, go learn from better coaches. And it's funny because I brought that up to EC that, that Northeast crew, and you're a part of it, really developed as some of the best coaches, from Ben Bergeron to EC to you to Austin. And it's like, because we were all around each other and constantly learning from one another. Who was your biggest influence as a coach when it came to that?
Oh man, there were so many. Actually, this made me think of something we were talking about with Instagram, but maybe I'll get back to that. So there's a lot. There was a lot of people. I mean, one of them was Neil Thompson, who was the original owner of CrossFit Boston. So, which I think was the first affiliate in Massachusetts, and I believe CrossFit Boston was one of the first 50 affiliates or 60 affiliates in the world. Started back in 2005, and the head coach there, Neil Thompson. I just learned a lot from him. He had this really awesome sort of like, even hand approach, and he was, patient, and you know what? He gave me an environment where I could fail safely. I remember the first time I coached down at CrossFit Boston, I showed up all plucky and, hey, Neil, I want to coach for you. And he said, cool, here's the 9 a.m. class. Today's workout is Nancy, coach him. And he went back in his office.
Now, did he watch you from that office, or did he just give you the...
He kept tabs on me, but it was like that class that I taught had a lot of their veteran members in it. And they were, as some CrossFit members can be, tough as nails and, had their own preconceptions about how a good class should be ran. So it was like, there's probably no better litmus test for him as far as whether or not he should keep me around. Because if there was something they didn't like, they would let him know and they would let me know there on the spot. And, but on top of that, he was, if I messed something up, I don't think it was like, all right, you're out. It was more of like, okay, great. So let's give you some tools to make it better and see if you're willing to put in the work to make it better. And I think that's really special, is to have a mentor in the sense who's going to allow you to screw up, point out what you could do better, but also give you an environment where you can do better. And that's really important.
So quick Neil Thompson tangent.
Yeah.
2009, Neil shows up with a baby-faced boat shoe wearing James Hobart to Albany CrossFit for the sectionals, introduces me to you and says, this guy's going to win. And, you looked like you do now, just with maybe 20 pounds less muscle, and you went on to win. So Neil clearly knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. I mean, he had been around a long time in CrossFit, and he was great to have, because I was so nervous and anxious about everything. I just remember Neil I would do a workout and I would be all pissed off, and Neil would be like, nope, that was good. Don't worry about it. You're going to be okay. And, he would give me some stuff to go work on. It was really fun work with Neil. I was pretty lucky. And while I was there, I got exposed to two trainers who were on seminar staff, in the form of Eva Claire Sinkowski and John Gilson. And then through CrossFit Boston, that's where I crossed paths with the Bergerons. And it was a really, really interesting place to be. And they were running level 2s there and level 1s there. So I had this really front row seat, to a pretty big turning point in CrossFit. And I count myself, talk about being in the right place at the right time. I mean, that was it.
And it's funny because I, speak to Boz, I spoke to you, Austin, and it's like, yeah, back in the day, it was that. Are you in the right place at the right time? I was lucky. I just got into CrossFit early enough, but part of it was you can be in the right place at the right time and still not succeed. If you're the common denominator would still be you guys all worked hard, showed up, worked for free, and were willing to learn. So there's more to just right place, right time. It's probably also maybe right effort. And
Yeah, I think that's probably a huge one too. Like advice for new coaches. It's funny. I was talking to a good friend of mine who's another affiliate owner out here, Max Isaac. He owns a gym up in Waltham, and he's got a really great mentality and outlook on work ethic and just the emotional intelligence of coaches. But you got to be able to grind as a coach. And I think if you're starting off and you want to be a part-time CrossFit coach and your goal is to be a millionaire, I think you're in the wrong place. At first, it's like, I think there's a lot of things you can do to be financially successful, but the long and the short of it is being a part-time coach, you have to be willing to fucking work and work really hard. The quality of life upside is huge. But at first, you have to accept the fact that maybe the financial upside isn't going to be enormous depending on how hard you are willing to work. And you have to be in a gym and do things like, I'm going to coach the class, and then I'll go clean the bathroom real quick, and then I'll go I'll clean down the whiteboards, and I'll spend half an hour before class talking to members and half an hour after class talking to members. And I do think if you want to be successful as a coach, like it has to start there. Like you need to, you're not above any job. I think that's some really, really important advice. And maybe more so than like the learn the progressions and that other kind of advice is like, check to see how willing you are to do that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of little pieces that goes into coaching that's more than just, running an enjoyable hour-long class. And a lot of it comes from that work ethic.
yeah, I know I spoke to James McDermott, who runs Albany CrossFit. He was on talking about his intern program, and every week he kicks off with cleaning part of the gym with the interns.
Yeah.
And I've, always used to say that if I can't trust you to take out the garbage, I can't trust you to coach a class. And too many people want to jump into this prestigious role of being a coach, but no one wants to, scrub toilets.
Yeah, and you just have to. It's 100% part of it. And and it's what's funny too is, the longer I've done this, knowing good progressions matters. But it's also really funny to me what else matters to members in your gym. It's like sometimes no one gives a shit if the push jerk progression. They just really don't want to listen to country music when they work out, or they might have liked today's workout, but they're really concerned why the showers aren't clean, or why the barbells are squeaky. So you have to pay attention to that little stuff. I mean, that's such a big one. And as someone who owns a gym, I don't, it'd be nice if everyone would work for free forever, but it's like, you want to see people who come in the door and make themselves, indispensable. And it's easy to find a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I'll come in and coach a class for a little bit. It's hard to find somebody who will coach a great class, help develop themselves, put in a little extra work. And those are the people you want to invest in. Yeah.
So
new coaches, get out there and bust your asses.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I mean, as a former box owner and, speaking to a lot of box owners, I don't care how well you coach. I need you to, I coach 2 hours a day at the box here, 2 hours a week at North Naples CrossFit. And honestly, no one gives a shit that I'm a level 4 coach.
Yeah.
They like the fact that I'm like, hey, what music do you guys want today? Let's have some fun. Let's, do this and that after. It's just the best hour. What are some things you do probably accidentally, so maybe you have to think about it, that make you so good that gives your members the best hour of their day?
Yeah.
Gilson talked a lot about this back in the day. He would call it unconscious competence, and he would say that's worse than conscious incompetence, right? Like not knowing what you do well is worse than not knowing what you do wrong, because you need to be able to replicate that. So what does James Hobart do?
That's funny, because I've heard Gilson say that. I'll tell you the first thing, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I know the other thing I wanted to talk about for new coaches was emotional intelligence, because I was almost like, I would say regardless of what in terms of technical coaching ability. I think as long as you can keep people safe, the biggest thing is, the following. And like you said, that's creating an environment where they have the best hour of their day. What do? I'll tell you this, I'm always worried about it. I mean, I'll give you a couple things that I think I do that help make it a more enjoyable class period, but I'm always freaking worried about it. I'm worried about whether or not people like the class, whether or not everyone enjoyed it. Did they feel like they get something out of it? Do all levels of athletes feel like they get something out of it? Was it fun for them? Did I send everyone back out the door at the end of the hour thinking that I got a little bit better today at something? So I'm constantly worried about it. That's the first thing. The simplest stuff that I do, it just starts with when they come in the door. It's a hey, hello, and a second question. It's making sure that nobody comes in the gym or leaves the gym without receiving a hi or a goodbye, and their name attached to it. I think that's really huge, because I think it helps make them feel comfortable. Aside from that, and I think this is advice I got from Austin, I try really hard not to overwhelm myself with the development of their fitness. And what I mean by that is, Austin summed it up as, when someone comes into a class, or everybody in your class, keep them safe. I mean, that's the first thing. You got to keep people safe. And there are lots of ways to do that, but keep them safe, make them better at one single thing, and help them have some fun. And I think for new coaches, that's such an important thing to look at, because one, it's a really low barrier to entry. And two, I do think it combines, the three important things of what we need to do. Athletes don't have to move well to get better in CrossFit. And the program, even applied poorly, works pretty damn well. I've almost never seen it not work. So I think there's like a lot of room in there for doing things like relating to athletes, spending 15 minutes post-workout to chat with them, maybe about not even how they did in the workout, but what else is going on in their life. What are they excited about this week? So I think two really big things that I would say off the bat. One is just, greeting people and, helping shepherd people as they leave the gym, saying goodbye to them. And the second one I would say is, spending a little bit of time getting to know your members beyond their air squat, I think is those are probably two things that I try to do. And then the third thing is, I try really hard to make warm-ups that I would want to do, that are a blend of entertaining, effective, and help prepare them, and enhance the skill or the movements that they're going to do in the workout. I still put a lot of time into planning my warm-ups. I will be honest and say there's probably no other part of my class that I plan. I don't sit down and write a class plan for how the workout is going to go or the progression that I'm going to teach. But as far as like the general warm-up when they first come in, I still put a lot of thought into that. I think it's the hardest part of the class, because it has to blend that like aspect of actually make their bodies better, but kind of get them also mentally and emotionally warmed up to enjoy the class. I think that's a huge part of that.
Yeah, you see, whether you're coaching the 5 a.m. or the 5 p.m., whether it's they're getting out of bed or getting out of work, you don't want them to come in and be like, oh no, we have to do this. Not like, they want to have fun. They just want to get loose and enjoy themselves. And, having had a lot of level 4 coaches on, having had seminar staff people on, everything you just said seems to be the common denominator. The CrossFit Seminar Staff has maybe 200 people on it, and most of them are smarter than me and better coaches, but they all would then say what you just said, having fun is the most important thing. Like, know the progressions, but keep it fun and obviously safe for your members. That's the challenge is you can't teach that.
You can't. And I think that's why I go back to like, hey, just know the foundations well. Like, you don't have to know about every body part, or, you don't have to have an advanced understanding of anatomy and physiology, but it's like, damn it, if you just know one push jerk progression really, really well, and the faults associated with the push jerk, like the back of your hand, that stuff can become involuntary. And then, the voluntary stuff can all become the relating to athletes, to seeing when you need to, give somebody a high five, how to motivate them, how to check in on them, to ask the question of, hey, here's how we usually scale this, but what do you feel like you could do today? I think that's one of the most important reasons of like, I never tell coaches that they need to know a progression because their athletes are ever going to really care. Their athletes may or may not know the difference, but when that stuff can get put on autopilot, I think you can do, the real honest work of a coach, and that's getting to know your athletes better and help them meet their goals, in the gym.
And if you're listening, I think one thing you can do that James said is just say hello and have a name attached to every single person. If you don't do that, you're failing as a coach.
Yeah, it has to be a welcoming environment, and I try and say this to a lot of people. It's like, me personally, like I'm a little awkward. Like I'm not the funniest guy in the room, and I'm definitely not the bubbliest guy in the room. But like I'll sure as shit make sure that like I know who you are and I care about knowing who you are. And I think however people do that, some people are a little bit more quiet, or they like a little bit more one-on-one. Other people like to do it through jokes or performance. Like however you do it, the least should happen is that they should all leave there knowing that like you paid attention to them, and I hear coaches all over the place, talk about how to do this differently. One of my first CrossFit coaches that I worked with, Mike Bazillion, who now runs CrossFit Great Barrington, which is the affiliate my mom goes, he just had an uncanny ability, I shouldn't say uncanny, it wasn't uncanny. He just had a persistent ability to make sure he remembered people's names. And if he didn't, constantly put them on the whiteboard and not be afraid to ask, and that's a really important skill.
Yeah. Shout out to Mike. I haven't thought of him in a little while. So
yeah,
I might reach out to him. How is Lucy doing?
My mom, yeah, she's doing very well. She actually just started, I believe, shadowing some classes at her affiliate, CrossFit Great Barrington. So I think she's gonna start coaching there, which is really, really cool.
If you don't follow Lucy, I think it's Lucy_FH or H. What's her Instagram handle?
It is Lucy_FH, I believe. Yeah.
Not that I'm checking out your mom, James, but
that's okay.
She's she is attractive.
She would honestly, if you
I'm gonna say that.
She'd love to hear that from you. Yeah.
But she's great. I mean, she's fit. I believe you told me at one point she was a smoker, right?
She did smoke, for a really long time.
So you can change her life. I mean, she's qualified for the top 200 in her age group in the past.
I believe she has done that. Yeah.
Yeah. I know a little more about your mom
because it goes right. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't doubt it. She is. She's way. I should take an Instagram. I think she's a really good example of, just why it's not always just about all the details of the progression. I mean, when she came into CrossFit, I saw someone who moved really well. And like, whenever I would coach her, I would just want to push her to use more weight, and give her some technical understanding. And that's just, not what she wanted at all. She was happy with her growth, and she has her class, her 7 a.m. alphas. I mean, fitness was the core of what made her life a little bit better, but it was all the other things that came with it, the camaraderie of the class, the environment of the gym, the fitness just kind of turned out to be a bonus.
And that's something I preach these days. A lot of people put out private programming. I know you guys do group programming, the Ham Plan, which I highly recommend people checking out, but a lot of people are doing private programming, and there's a push, we don't have to drop any initials out there, but there's a push for people to do their own thing. And I'm like, cool. Is this smart and good programming? Probably, but only if people do it. And, I can't do that. I can't work out by myself anymore. I need to be in class.
Yeah. I mean, I've done this for 12 years, and and I don't mean this as like a, let me tip my hat, like I'm the man kind of deal. It's not at all, but I've worked out consistently. I've worked out against the best CrossFit athletes on the planet. And I think that it truly comes down to, it's not necessarily what you do, it's who you do it with and how you do it. And that matters so much. And nobody, not everyone likes that answer. And I'll also say this, if you want to do your own program or a private program or a special program, then that's fine. It's like, I'm not going to take a big dump on somebody's head because when they go into Starbucks, they want to order an iced coffee instead of a hot coffee. If that's their taste and that's what they want, great. The market is well equipped to handle that. But I do want new coaches, to, man, and yeah, I do. I run one third partner of the hand plan. And I think what we do is so important. And I really love what we do, in terms of programming and class plans. But at the end of the day, it's like there's good programming for free everywhere. And if you're consistent with it and, you scale it, effectively and consistently and well, it's like you're going to get fit for a fucking lifetime. And you would never have to touch any private or specialized or specific programming. I mean, it's just, the constantly varied functional movement, high intensity piece, coupled with the camaraderie piece and the competitive aspect that I think comes from taking a class with your friends. I mean, I think that's it. That's the least you need for a lifetime of fitness, especially if you enjoy it. And my only fear is that like new trainers, coaches, athletes get hoodwinked by this notion that if they don't do something specialized to them, they're not going to get the secret sauce. And that's just such a crock of shit, and I'd hate for people to go on thinking that.
Well, I do want to address that, but before I do that, let me say, before Austin loses his mind, one thing you said is, yeah, you can get free programming everywhere, cool, but realize if you're using the hand plan, you're getting a lesson plan for your class. It's not simply, I don't think you're paying as much for the programming as you are for the planning of the class. We don't have to dive too deep into it, but there's far more value than just, here's the workout of the day when you subscribe to hand plan.
Yeah. And, like I said, I think I'm obviously very proud of our programming and at the hand plan, and I do think it's very well done. And, I believe that you get a little bit something extra, from three people who have been involved with every aspect of the community, from coaching to owning affiliates to competing, combined. I think me, Spencer, and Austin have, over 30 years of experience. But what's really interesting is when I look at our programming is it's full of a lot of fundamentals. I do think the class plans that we offer, my goal with those, and they have been developing, has been to try and share the insight that we have when the three of us go into a class or coach a class and how we handle it. And so, yeah, there's some suggested progressions in a class plan, but really what the class plans have started to become is, the insight I might, have to a certain workout, or how I view a workout, both as, how are you going to control the class? What is the motivation you look for with your class today? What are specific things you should watch out for? So yeah, I certainly think, of course, there's a lot of value in that. And also with that, I hope coaches, if they decide to use something like that, it's not a crutch that they always have. I hope they evolve beyond it. It's like I want them to gain some skills for it and be able to make it their own long term. I just get so worried about, people thinking that the only way for them to get fitter is to find, constantly search for some specialized and specific program. And I think if you look at just the basic success at CrossFit.com, it was a free programming platform forever. It just should remind us that if we're consistent with it and we pay attention to what we're bad at and chase that, we can continually get better. I don't think, you always have to search for some specialized programming.
So let's take a moment and dump on people's heads. Right? You said you didn't want to, but I want to for a second.
All right.
There's a lot of people listening that probably do their own programming. And the truth is, they don't know any better. Like you said, they just think they do. Rather than just saying, hey, you don't, or hey, class is where you should be, what are some, metrics? What are some indicators they could use to decide that, do I need to do this versus could I get better simply going to class and training with intensity?
Yeah, it's funny. So, and I'm a little less righteous on this than I used to believe it or not. But, Pat Sherwood and I, used to talk about this a lot. Pat was one of my mentors on Seminar Staff and now works very closely with, developing, CrossFit Health. They'd worked on CrossFit Media for a while, but, he once said to me, he said, what, if people are safe and they come into the gym and you have the space for it in your affiliate, and they just want to do 20 extra workouts or follow such and such as programming, he's like, I don't have that big of a deal with it. One of the things I think is really good for your athletes to kind of, if they're on the fence of where to go, or they're having time with it, is to just continually provide some little pieces of education about how to track effectively, or at least helping draw them to what their goals are, just not necessarily confronting them, but just having them ask the question of like, hey, why do you come in regularly? What are some of the things you want to have happen? And through there, if you can start to understand their goals or help them understand their goals a little better, I think it becomes easier to answer those questions. It becomes easier to point them to the things in a class that occur in a class that will make them better without specialized programming or some specific programming that they do on their own. I think that can be one of the most helpful things. So let me give you a quick example. So I guess an example would be in this month, we are going to look at, the focus for us at Handplan is building your engine in May. That's the focus that we have for our affiliate programming. And that includes basically just kind of getting better at, what you might call like classic CrossFit kind of stuff, like the Cindy's of the world, but also monostructural efforts. And so I was talking to my class this morning, and I said, guys, this could be really easy to track, because truly a lot of athletes, we always, I'm an old school guy this way. I love stuff going up on the whiteboard. But sometimes after class, I get everybody's scores up there, and people are like, what, they don't care. It doesn't, it just gets erased at the end of the day, and they don't track it at all. So I was talking to a couple athletes this morning who said they hate running. Oh, I hate running. Okay. And I said, well, what do you hate about it? Well, I never know how to pace. It's just always uncomfortable. But then someone said, I noticed that when I run a little more often, it gets easier, And that's really a simple observation, but it's 100% true. So one of the things we talked about, I said, hey guys, here's your goal for the month. If you hate running, one, I said, try to show up to the running classes, scale it to the distances, whatever you feel comfortable. But I said, your goal for the month is to make sure that wherever the halfway point is in your run, you always try and do a negative split. So you always make the back half a little faster. So for example, if you're running a 400, you can run your 200 out as smooth and controlled as you want, but when you turn around, you got to try and come in a little bit harder. And so that, that's the goal for a couple of athletes. And I think when you can start to understand what people's goals are or frustrations are, you can start to give them some very, very simple targets that help them, even in a class environment where there's a diverse demographic of athlete skill levels and diverse set of needs, you can really start to help your athletes out by just giving them small pieces of education throughout the workout. I think probably the biggest litmus test, sorry, I'm going on here, but the biggest litmus test for, whether or not athletes, I hate the word should do a private programming is just really, do they want to? And, I think after asking them about what their goals are and giving them some education about how a class environment helps them meet those goals, if they're still just like, yeah, I just want to do my own programming for a little while, I don't think it's the end of the world as long as you have the space for it in your gym, and it's not going to pollute the environment or the mood of the other athletes in the class.
I could agree with that. Right. It's no different than class. Hey, if that's what it takes for you to enjoy yourself and come back in, great. I think people are forcing themselves to do a lot of that when they actually would have more fun and therefore get fitter by going to class. But one thing you just nailed that I hope people took from this is that's also how you motivate those better athletes. Like, give them those little carrots and dangle them. Like, have a negative split. Or, Fern and I had a podcast about scaling, and I said sometimes maybe start your better athletes a minute or two behind and get them to try to catch up. Give those better athletes something to challenge them, and then they'll realize I can still get fit in class.
Yeah, and I just think a lot of the times when I bump into athletes in the gym who want some private programming or are frustrated like that, it's usually because there's some need that's not being met in class, but typically that need can be met in class. And some of that just comes from you not knowing your athletes well. Most of the time it's like, for me, it's been as simple as, someone's like, I'm just really frustrated with my pull-ups and I want to get more strict pull-ups. And I'm like, well, cool. Instead of, going to a private programming, like tell your coach at the beginning of class, and then every time kipping pull-up shows this month, you're going to do strict, and I guarantee your strict pull-ups will be better. I think a lot of the, searching of your members to go elsewhere for physical benefit comes from you just not knowing them well enough or paying attention to them enough. I think there's something to that.
All right, you've been featured on CrossFit for nearly a decade now. What's the favorite video you've ever been featured in?
Oh, damn, Jay, that's a good question.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I thought long and hard.
Um, all right, yeah, I'll tell you. Honestly, and this is probably one of my, if I had to say like, what are your proudest CrossFit accomplishments? I would say this one is way up there. This one probably, I think this one beats out probably anything I've done as a competitive athlete. But being in the demo videos is just one of the greatest, personally for me, just honors and humbling achievements I've ever had. I learned CrossFit from videos of Annie Sakamoto and Greg Amundsen, and Pat Barber and Adrian Bosman. That's how I learned CrossFit. And so to be in some of those demo videos, and doing some of our 9 foundational movements, alongside some really amazing people like Julie Fouché and Camille and those other athletes. That's probably one of my, if I had to say, like, that's like my favorite video up there. The other one was just the one of my mom. There was a video, a little CrossFit Journal video that they put out of my mother doing CrossFit and her journey through CrossFit.
You
And
know,
that was one of my favorites to be in.
I'll definitely check that one out. But yeah, just so you guys know, whether you're taking, tests or you're looking at the videos online, James and Julie Fouché are featured, and our friend Todd Ashudo takes credit oftentimes because people think it's him in the demo. James, I just want you to know that.
I do know that. I'm glad because Todd needs that.
Okay, I'll let him know it's okay. I didn't know if you'd be upset by that.
I don't mind Todd riding my coattails. It's he needs that in his life.
He does need that. I hope he's listening, and he needs that. He is certainly riding multiple coattails.
But also a flowmaster.
He is a flowmaster, which is great.
Todd would probably ride anything of mine.
This is a clean podcast, but I agree with you. What now? Earlier on, and we're getting ready to wrap up. But earlier on, you mentioned you drop in, you take classes. It's intimidating. A James Hobart walks in. I'm not as intimidating, but people see you and they're like, he's a good coach. What are we going to do to help him? We still need coaching. But what has been some of the biggest mistakes you've seen? Obviously, doing the opposite of everything we just spoke about. But do you have any specifics? Like, if you do this, it's a mistake when you're coaching?
Big mistakes. I can just tell when people don't have a general timeline plan. And, I don't think it's the end of the world because I still think the class can be fun. But, when I tell that someone has a little bit of a plan, at least as far as like, I'm only going to spend 10 minutes here and 5 minutes here and 15 minutes here, I think class just runs a lot. It's just a lot smoother. And the coach is able to be themselves a little bit more. To be honest with you, when I go to an affiliate to take a class, I love taking class because I get to be on autopilot. Typically, my coaching brain, my evaluation brain is totally shut off. But I think that's probably one of the biggest ones I see. And I think one of the other really big ones, coaches who are totally disengaged, like there's no coach-led warm-up, there's no coach-led specific warm-up. They're just, it's basically someone who's good at being a cup holder and a timekeeper. I think that's probably the mistake. If you're disengaged, you're just a barnacle, right? And ain't nobody got time for that.
And that's a box owner problem too, right? Like,
yeah,
sure, it's you're the coach, but if you're a box owner and that's because I've had box owners reach out, like, how do I motivate this guy? I'm like, you fire them. That's how you
fire his
them.
ass.
And they'll be better at another box, but not at yours.
Yeah, or just another job. It's like even the coaches who I see who provide like the worst, cues. They're just yelling technique at their members. Like, try harder. Even the coaches who have the worst technical capability, if they're really engaged, that shines through. Because I think if you're engaged and you're tuned in and you're compassionate, like, you'll care enough to stop an athlete before they do something stupid or if they're being unsafe. And I think if you're engaged, you're at least, providing them with an experience of showing like, hey, the leader of the class is checking in on me and wants to help me out. And maybe the athlete doesn't know whether or not your cue is helping them out, and that's okay. Or maybe your cue is crappy, but the first thing is you just have to be engaged. So being a disengaged coach is probably the biggest thing, I've seen gone wrong, or I kind of think like, oh, that's too bad. From there, it's just, I think you can kind of tell when people don't have a plan. There should be some semblance of a plan as they walk through class. I think those are two really big issues. And it's small. Like, I'm not saying spend 5 hours slaving over a plan at night. Just, think about some basic things that you want the class to leave with by the end of the day and that you want to accomplish.
Yeah, our good buddy Austin would push that as you have to give a shit. And if you don't give a shit, it's apparent.
I think what might be better is like some of the things, it's funny. It's like not so much what do I see and think are the biggest mistakes. Some of the things I see the best coaches do well. Like I said, I know I'm in a good affiliate when I walk in the door and no one knows me and other members come up to me and introduce themselves. Like, I know I'm in somewhere that's good and special. I think when I hear the coach, speak to the class as kind of like a friend, the example I would use is, when I hear coaches giving some intention or insight to the workout, that's more than just rereading the workout to me. Like, hey, here's this workout, Fran, 21, 15, 9, 95 pounds, 65 pounds. It's supposed to be thrusters and pull-ups. It's supposed to be fast to make you puke. When I hear something more than that, like a trainer says something like, hey guys, I've done Fran before. It's a class at benchmark. I think what I like to see you guys do is find a loading where you can go unbroken and push yourself. And for those of you who struggle with pull-ups, that's okay. Today we're gonna bring the pull-up reps down. And if you're great at pull-ups, I wanna challenge you guys to do them unbroken. So when I hear some of that sort of like, you might call it hand-holding, but when I hear coaches share their own insight and expectation and personality into discussing like the goals of the day, that's always like a really good sign. I love that. And I think I really like when I see coaches who interact with athletes as they're taking them through reps. And I think a good example would be, the coach who just calls reps ad nauseum, and then the coach who like calls reps, notice the group is getting their ass kicked and like makes a joke about it or checks in and asks everybody how they're doing. That's like, oh, how are you guys feeling? Oh, you're sore? Good. We're gonna keep doing reps then. We're gonna make that worse. I like when coaches create an environment that's almost conversational, as if they're kind of chatting with you and they go through it. I think those are some things I see go really, really well.
All right, I know your time is valuable and we need to get wrapping up, but one question I always like to ask is, what is one book you would recommend that the listeners read?
Oh, you've been on a book kick lately too. I'm turning around and I'm going to look at my my list of books. Well, mine's not a happy book, but I read, I read this book. I think I've talked about this on a previous podcast, and I read this book, Hunger, by an author, Roxane Gay, and it's basically, it discusses something that happened to her when she was young. I don't want to give it away, and it's not a happy story. She kind of had a very tragic event in her life, horrible event. She discusses in the book how it shapes her perception and how it affected her and still does, and how she perceived herself, relationships, the rest of the world. And what I really loved about that book is it provided a perspective to me that I probably, I will never have in my life. And it provided me a perspective and reminded me of the fact that even if you're someone who's really willing to help other people, you don't have all the answers. And, there's a lot of value sometimes in pursuit of trying to help others in spending time getting to hear, listen to, and appreciate their perspective rather than just saying, hey, I see that you have an issue. I want to help you. Here are all the tools I have to help you. And I think that's a really important thing, not just as a CrossFit coach, but as a coach slash teacher. You really have to, understand when is it time to help others, and when is it time to hear about how you can best help others, and when is it time to just understand that maybe your help is not for this person. And I thought that book was really incredible, and it's powerful, and I think it forces you to kind of come to terms with this, like, hey, if I work hard and I care enough, I can fix all the problems. And in the real world, that's not always the case. Those are great qualities to have. And, it also helps you understand that the more perspectives and walks of life that you can expose yourself to, I think the more effective you will be as both a learner and a teacher and a listener and, a compassionate caregiver. So it was a pretty great book. It is a great book.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me in the past, but I always write down the books that the guests mention, and I'm going to check that one out. So
yeah, and that's not like, it's like I said, it's like everybody's into like these happy self-help books. Everyone's like having this big stoic philosophy kick. It's like this book is really, this book is really, it's real life, and I think it's pretty powerful.
where can people find James Hobart? I mean, you can check out the ham plan. We talked about that with Austin.
Yeah, he's gonna kill me for that. But we actually just got a new website, thehamplan.com. A friend of ours just redid that for us, so that is excellent if you guys want to go there.
And they can get a 7-day trial also.
You can get a 7-day trial and see what we do. We just reformatted our class plans. And I think one of the big values is, you get a lot of attention from myself, Austin, and Spencer Hendel, which, I think is cool. We don't, maybe we don't have all the answers, but, each of us have over a decade of experience that we're pretty eager to share. I mean, we're all affiliate owners, and so it's definitely a labor of love for us.
And what about you directly? I know you're on Instagram. You do a great job with your picture quality, your content, but if people don't already follow you, what's your Instagram handle?
I appreciate you saying that, because that's one thing I'm always stressed out about.
No, it's great. I read it. I mean, I like a lot of pictures, but there are some people that actually read what they write because it's actually valuable, and yours is one of it. So what's your handle?
That's right back at you too. James Hobart, just my name, James Hobart. If you want to find me on Instagram, and I hope you like it.
You're not on Facebook, correct?
I am on
Facebook,
so
now?
if you just search James Hobart, yeah. My fiance created a Facebook for me because, I think I'm a troglodyte and I live in the Stone Age with social media. But so yeah.
Well, it's been great chatting with you. You always are super knowledgeable, super motivating, and I know that if people are still listening, they got a ton of knowledge from you. Super simple stuff, and that's what the best coaches do. They keep it simple. So thanks again for being on, James.
Jason, I appreciate it, and thank you for having me. And I hope that helps some people. If not, maybe they'll get a laugh or two.